We'll call this meeting to order. Representative Watro, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Yes. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all very much for being here today. We're going to start things off with introductions. My name is David Rowe. I have the privilege of representing the 85th Legislative District, just a little bit east of here, including Union, Snyder, Juniata, and Mifflin counties. I'm going to start off asking all of the members to introduce themselves and their districts. We're going to start with our first panel. We're going to let you gentlemen introduce yourselves first, and then we'll start all the way down with Representative Diorsi and just do the whole panel. Representative Kephart.
Yep. Representative Dallas Kephart, Clearfield and Cambria County. I have the fortunate pleasure to represent Quahana Boot Camp.
Representative Kerry Benninghoff. I represent half of Center County and half of Mifflin County, are sitting pretty close to it. Thank you for being here.
Representative Joe Diorsi. I represent the 47th Legislative District, which is located in eastern York County.
Stephanie Borowitz. I represent the 76th District. It is Clinton and most of Union County.
Representative Jamie Flick, 83rd District, parts of Lycoming County and parts of Union County.
Representative Brenda Pugh. I'm with the 120th District, and I am in Luzerne County.
Representative Dane Watrow, the 116th District, southern Luzerne County, northern parts of Schuylkill County.
Senator Wayne Langerholtz, 35th Senatorial District, all of Cambria County, all of Clearfield County, and parts of Center County, Quahana being in that district.
And Senator Chris Dush, I represent the 25th Senatorial District, McKean, Potter, Elk, Cameron, Clinton, and then parts of Jefferson and Center County to include the Rockview State Prison. And I'm a retired corrections officer.
Hello, Representative Brian Smith, District 66, all of Jefferson County and northern Indiana County.
Good afternoon, Mike Armanini, 75th District, Elk, and parts of Clearfield County.
Brett Miller, 41st District, parts of Lancaster County.
Kristen Marcel, the 178th District from Bucks County.
We also may have some members joining online. I know there are lots of members traveling today, so they'll be able to join in online. We will be sure to recognize them when they get here. I want to thank everybody for attending today, all of the members. I mean, we have members from the northeast to the southeast. We have members that have traveled several hours to be here today to talk about this very important issue. So I want to thank everybody for attending. I want to thank members of the press that have been able to join us, as well as members of the public who were able to be here today. The reason we're here today is because the state government generally has a problem with managing expectations. I think every single person on this panel would say that we are fiscally conservative. But despite that, this pitch that these state prison closures are necessary to save money rings hollow when there's no follow through with actually offloading those assets and making sure they become part of the private sector economy. Since 2006, $180 million of taxpayer money has been used to maintain state facilities that has been closed. And we have that referenced up here. From state hospitals to state centers to retreats. The fact is, simply mothballing these facilities has yet to demonstrate any sort of real savings to the taxpayer. Today specifically, we're discussing Governor Shapiro's proposed closures of SCI Rockview and the Quahana Boot Camp and the impact that that's going to have on our communities. We obviously can look at the economic impact, providing over 1,000 jobs in rural Pennsylvania, housing over 2,500 inmates. These facilities are essential to the local economy. Specifically, Quahana, which we're going to hear quite a bit more about, it's a 6-month military-style program designed for those to address their drug and alcohol treatment needs. I think everybody knows that the opioid epidemic, the struggles that many Pennsylvanians have, those issues are only getting worse. They're not getting better. And so when we are discussing mothballing facilities that attempt to treat and succeed at treating those issues, we have to take those conversations very seriously. Specifically, we have to look at what the long-term ramifications of of mothballing a facility versus the long-term effects that it's going to have society and the costs that we're going to have to absorb later to address those losses. We're going to be eliminating, by shutting these prisons down, we're going to be eliminating family-sustaining jobs, and we're going to be taking away vital resources from those individuals that are trying desperately to re-enter the workforce and become part of society once again. What we don't want to see happen is for SCI Rockview and Quahana to simply become empty spectacles at the expense of the taxpayer, and just to be added to that $180 million we've already spent by mothballing, but then retaining and having to maintain those facilities. So we're going to be exploring the impacts on the community that these closures, these proposed closures, will have here today. And I want to thank our testifiers for being here. We have a very interesting first panel here. It is not typical for us to have members on the opposite side of the table, but we want to thank both of our hosting members, Representative Benninghoff and Representative Kephart, as well as our senators, Senator Dush and Langerholk, for being here today, for demonstrating their commitment to their communities, to the jobs, and to the environment, the economic impact that these facilities have here in the area. So we're going to start off. Our first panel is going to be Representative Carrie Benninghoff and Representative Dallas Kephart. Our second panel will then be Greg Scott, who's the CEO of the Center County Chamber of Commerce, and I will reintroduce these as well when we get to them. We also have John Eckenrode, who will be our president of the Pennsylvania State Correctional Officers Association, Mr. Stephen Clark, who is also the PSCOA local president at SCI Rockview, Miss Elisa Liptak, she's a corrections officer at the Quahana Boot Camp, as well as Fraser Blake, who is also the retired commander at the Quahana Boot Camp. Our third panel, also going to be very interesting. We're going to have Josh Paul, who is the legislative director to Senator Dave Argall, who has some legislation that's going to be very pertinent to the topic we are discussing today. We did also have some other panelists that we invited to participate. We did invite the Department of Corrections to attend. They declined to attend. They did provide us written testimony, which is available to the members. Unfortunately, their written testimony didn't really answer any questions, actually created more questions. And so hopefully we can discuss some of those here today. We did also invite the Department of General Services, which is responsible for maintaining most of the facilities referenced earlier today. They did not get back to us regarding our invitation. So for the good of our testifiers, each testifier, we're going to give you about 3 to 5 minutes. We would like to make sure we certainly have time for Q&A, especially for our second set of panelists. So make sure you try to stay to that 3 to 5 window so we have plenty of time for questions. We're going to start things off with Representative Kephart. You're kicking us off.
Well, thank you, Chairman Rowe, and I want to personally thank all the members of the committee who ventured to State College today to hear about this important topic. And like Chairman Rowe said, some of you came several hours, 3 from Bucks there, so thank you. I represent Quahana Boot Camp. Been to the facility many times. It's a tremendous facility, and I want to share a little bit about why today it should not be closed. So I'm before you today to advocate for the continued operation of the Quahana Boot Camp. This facility has proven its worth in reducing recidivism, fostering education, and helping our community. Quahana is an effective criminal justice center. Quahana Boot Camp has lowered reoffending rates among correctional facilities in Pennsylvania. According to the DOC report in 2008 and 2016, all 3 measurement terms of recidivisms of 6 months, 1 year, and 3 years showed Quahana to have lower recidivism rates than other facilities. I have not had access to official numbers in recent years, as the DOC has yet to provide such numbers even after requested, so I'm left to the reports that we have available. The DOC evaluated its programs in a 2022 report as well, and by the DOC's own admission in this report, Quahana Boot Camp, on average, lower recidivism rates by 9.5% to 18%. This was according to an evaluation completed in February of 2016. Its unique program instills discipline, accountability, and a sense of purpose in participants. Research shows that placing low-risk individuals in high-risk environments often lead to negative outcomes. Quahana's community model is not based with other general mixed populations like a larger facility, and provides a safer environment for inmates to heal, grow, and regenerate into society successfully. Education is also a cornerstone of rehabilitation, and Quahana excels in this area. The facility accounts for most GEDs awarded across Pennsylvania's correctional institutions. Of the roughly 24 facilities in Pennsylvania, Coahana produces the most GEDs, and that is done as one of the smaller correction facilities as to prison population. According to Secretary Harry's own testimony earlier this year, Coahana outperforms the next closest facility by approximately double the GEDs, with only a fourth of the inmate population. Think about that. A quarter of the inmate population produces approximately double the GEDs of your next facility. GED attainment opens doors to employment opportunities and further education, reducing the likelihood of reoffending. Coahana also offers vocational training, equipping inmates with skills in demand in the workforce. The closure of Coahana would also have devastating consequences for our rural community. Approximately 80% of Coahana's staff live in Carthage Township, Clearfield County, where Coahana is located. The township has a little over 800 residents in total. The facility employs over 200 staff and supports local businesses. Also, there is Nigeria Flooring near Coahana, which is jeopardized if Coahana closes, a private business. I would also note that according to a recent Center Daily Times article, Clearfield County is the 7th poorest county in the state. That is not necessarily one we are proud of, but it is the reality we're facing. Harrisburg and D.C. have spent a considerable amount of time enacting policies that have been detrimental to our area. But I would also note that the poorest county in the state is Cameron County, which is just north of the facility and has residents working at Coahana as well. This closure would be detrimental to our area. Now, I also want to spend some time talking about the fiscal responsibility as the governor is looking to cut costs, but I have my suspicions on such. Governor Shapiro and his administration have targeted these closures to save money, supposedly. First, it is the fallacy for a guy that wants to spend approximately $4 billion more than we did last year on this year's budget, for a total of $51.5 billion is his proposal, and approximately $5.5 billion more than we brought in revenue, to act like he cares to save any taxpayer money. This is also a governor proposed sending $161 million to Philadelphia to bus people around after taking $153 million from road projects throughout the rest of the state to fund that same Philadelphia transportation system bailout. But let's look at the facts of what closing Coahana Boot Camp would do, as I believe in fiscal responsibility and have a record to prove it, unlike the governor. The estimate is closing Coahana would save $5 million a year without considerations for mothballing of a few $100,000 per year. However, according to the same 2016 report referenced earlier, the DOC, quote, the PA DOC saves approximately $11,431 per boot camp participant, end quote. Also, according to the report released in February 2016, quote, this is the DOC's report, since December of 1992, the PA DOC has saved approximately $104.8 million by operating the Coahana Motivational Boot Camp, end quote. I did not have to do the calculation. The DOC did it for us in their 2016 report on how much the boot camp saves compared to traditional imprisonment. Coahana is effective for many reasons, but it is unique setting, location, program, and staff make it unique in an effective criminal justice center. Let's also touch upon the falsities in the DOC report on the proposed closure. The report says about all these upgrades that need done at Coahana, and Rockview for that matter, and specifically lists paving at Coahana. Well, last year there was a renovation at Coahana that was done, and I know it occurred firsthand because when I visited the facility, I had to go in differently than normal. There was a major renovation project. Next, all the paving is done, all fresh paving. There is no paving to do. The report is not accurate of current condition of the facility. If this closure goes through, it would be a slap in the face to taxpayers who just spent millions of dollars upgrading these facilities. Lastly, I'd also note that it is not just the objective numbers. I've had people contact my office that were former inmates of the correctional facility at boot camp. In fact, a constituent of Representative Miller, who's here today, contacted me through him, and she said, Representative, please do not close that boot camp. My son went there. He was a good boy, but he made a bad decision, and it really straightened him up and got him on the right track. There was another inmate from Drexel Hill that reached out to me. Said, please, I went through the program. It saved my life. Last week, we were at the Coahana hearing that put on by the DOC. We had 3 different inmates show up. One owns a business today and employs people. He came. The other one was going to college and said, please, do not shut this place down. It saved our lives and got us straight. That's the facts of Coyhana Boot Camp. So in conclusion, Coyhana Boot Camp is more than a correctional facility. It offers hope and transformation. Former inmates and family members, like I said, have reached out to me, expressed their concerns, and expressed it Save Open. It saves lives and got them straight. Closing it would undermine the progress made in reducing recidivism and promoting education and harm our community's economic fabric. It is fiscally responsible to save this facility. Coyhana works and is an effective criminal justice center and should remain open. Thank you.
Representative Benninghoff.
Well, that might be a tough act to follow. Our energetic younger member and attorney, we're proud of. He does a good job, and I think he gives you a very good analysis, especially for facilities out in rural Pennsylvania. I'm going to paraphrase some of my comments so they aren't overly redundant of that, but I'd ask you to take a quick walk back in time. A lot of people don't realize, but over 100 years ago, the state chose to pick very prime agricultural properties out in rural Pennsylvania to put the majority of prisons, to put our intellectual disability centers in. Sadly, now we're seeing on acres and acres of property that is not being utilized for what its original intent was. But I think it's important to know that history. In addition to that, I would ask you to think about what the word does corrections mean. Is it just punishing somebody for doing something wrong, or ultimately is the goal to try to change that behavior, correct them, and make them productive out in society? I believe that my colleague to my left did an elegant job about saying how Coyhana does that, but there's some similar things going on at Rockview. So why are we here today? Well, I would tell you, as one of the legislators sitting in this room, and I suspect the majority of them, we're here because we feel like there's a lack of information, lack of transparency in the process. Your very title says you're elected representative. Who do you represent? You represent the people who put you into office in your communities. But yet when we run into each other, and I talk to people even at the prison today, and we ask questions, nobody has any answers. Why? I don't know, because this was done behind closed doors. The lack of transparency in this process I find extremely frustrating and counterintuitive to the democratic process and what representative government should be about. More importantly, we're here because of the impact of the regional economy. And why do I say regional economy? Well, I don't think it was an accident that somehow someone decided to pit two prisons within a 30-mile distance of each other against one another. We're putting communities against each other because we have a competitive market for jobs and employers. Frankly, these two institutions employ people, multiple counties, good family-sustaining jobs. Our good friends in the COs in those businesses, both men and women, you know, they had got to monitor and protect some of the toughest blocks in our neighborhoods. We were just actually in there, and I'll mention in a moment, not in a place I would want to be working. There's a trickle-down impact, too, to our communities. Suppliers who provide services to those institutions, whether it's the healthcare, medical, hospitals, doctors, food processors, mechanical services suppliers. There's a significant impact. In the more rural community, the larger the impact. My other reason I wanted to be here today and why we asked to host this hearing is, at the end of the day, I was thinking about the relatively mundane excuses we hear from corrections about, well, we'll save $10 million a year, roughly $74 million over the next 10 years. Number one, their math's off. But number two, some savings I'm not sure if I agree with. More importantly, not one single legislator do I know was ever contacted before this came out. We learned about it in the state budget back on February 4th that two prisons might close. For those of us here geographically, 2 weeks later we found out it is going to be our two prisons. Again, competing neighborhoods, competing workforces, some of which are already struggling. That's no way to do business. I talked to my township supervisor, who actually the prisons preside in. They found out 1 hour before the press conference. That's not public transparency. So what am I getting to? The question would be asked, why all the secrecy? If indeed your proposal was right and you are correct and your math is correct that this is financially unsustainable to continue to keep this going, lay it on the table. Let us know. Now, you'll be told later on that there's going to be another hearing tomorrow night, subsequent of some legislation we passed back in 2018, known as Act 133, which requires stakeholder meetings. Well, this is kind of the stakeholder meetings after the boat's heading over the falls. That doesn't give me a lot of confidence. Very concerned about that. At the end of March, there was a public televised hearing for appropriations. We tried to get some more information regarding this commission that was put together, but yet to today, we're still not really satisfied with who selected the commission, who was all on the commission, and how many times did they meet. Again, why such secrecy? I think we need to realize that families are right now been put on hold for the last couple months. Families who may want to put an addition on their house, families who may want to add another child or make some type of purchase now don't know if they can because they don't know if they're going to have a job. I understand they've been promised a job within the system, but to what distance are they going to be going? Today we did take a tour of Rockview Prison, and sadly I'm under the understanding that some employees are leaving because of fear of not being able to find a job. They will grab one when they see it. And we're probably going to have a few retire earlier than what we should have when we need this tenure. We need these people with their background and they're intelligent. I think the whole proposal is what I said earlier, penny wise and pound foolish. So you might say, okay, well, what are your solutions? Well, very simply, I think the state would be far further ahead if we'd spend the same amount of energy trying to figure out what to do with all the empty buildings and empty prisons that we already have. If my calculation is correct, there's 4 empty state prisons statewide sitting around being mothballed, but still costs money to keep them over. I believe we also have 4 intellectual disability centers. Again, prime ag land sitting around with buildings mothballed, still have to be maintained. Some may have to have heat in them, and the property's mowed. We're spending millions and millions of dollars mowing grass and taking care of things for buildings that aren't occupied, and yet we don't have the money to do it here. I think babysitting buildings for millions of dollars is ludicrous. It doesn't make much sense to me. Before me, I just wanted to show there's an example of a set of petitions, and this is only one of our 3,500 employees, mothers, brothers, sisters, fathers, people who are trying to raise their families, some of them both working in one of the institutions or maybe 2 of the different institutions. This is about families. This is about children. This is about people wanting to have economic security, no different than anyone else here or anybody in the governor's office. 2 other quick items. As I said, some of us had just toured Rockview State Prison, and I was somewhat concerned when I saw the quality of some of the repair work that's been done. We have been told that there are at least $10 million of repairs that need to be done, but yet we were shown the roofs on AD, they're done. We were shown replacement boilers and some of the work that was done internally by some of the employees and some of the inmates. That's done. We're seeing the dam upgrades. Some of us just stood on this beautiful dam, very tranquil area, and those upgrades are done. And they're replacing the fencing. Now, the average person listening here says, well, fencing can't cost that much. We're talking about perimeter fencing, which is very expensive. We're talking about razor wire that needs to go on that, and all electronics to open and close these things, in addition to the fact that when they went to put the new perimeter fencing up, they realized by new standards that the interior fencing was too close. So then we had to replace all of it, both inside, outside. Millions and millions of dollars being spent. We also saw new roofs. We saw whole exterior buildings refaced and repainted. And I stood on asphalt, and we're told they need to do a lot of paving, who most of you wish were the driveways to your home. Unbelievable. At the end of the day, I think the public, as well as the legislature, those who have to make decisions, and those who are faced with an economic decision by the end of June in a budget should have true facts and figures of what is really needed, what's been done, and what the balance is. There are better ways to do this. Sell these vacant buildings, liquidate them, and put the money back into keeping the ones we have. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do appreciate you hosting us here in Center County, and to the members for traveling here. This is a very, very important thing economically to our communities and the subsequent communities around us. I'll close on it. If you go outside of Center County, the economy drops off pretty significant at times. There's not a lot of industry. That these people travel 30, 40, 50 miles to come here, if not further, because they feel secure having that job and employment. And you know what? They're also dedicated to what they do. We saw wood industries. We saw the nursery industry. We have inmates being taught trades that when they leave, they don't come back. So I'll go back to the beginning. What is corrections about? Why are we here today? Because I think we can do better. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. I want to first recognize Cindy Coons is here from Congressman Glenn Thompson's office. I just want to make sure we recognize the congressman's presence here today. We're going to have a couple of questions from some of our colleagues. I would encourage colleagues to remember that we do have 2 more panels to go, and the next one is going to be quite robust, so I would ask you to please keep your questions short and sweet. We're going to start off with Representative Brian Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman Benninghoff and Representative Kephart, for coming today and speaking to us about your districts and this major issue we have. The tour today was interesting. It was very interesting, and you hit upon one part, Chairman Benninghoff, was the corrections part of it. We saw a lot of corrections today, whether it was mental, physical, health-wise, or drug and alcohol related. What they're doing for these inmates and to get them rehabilitated, to get them back out. So that brings up one point. We went through the drug and alcohol building, and I think it was limited to 150 inmates. They said 75 on each side. And because of the number of inmates that need that program, they cut the program in half, month-wise. It was 8 months, now it's only 4, just so they can revolve those inmates through there. I don't think that's fair to the inmates. I mean, I'm not a drug and alcohol person that I know how length of time they need to be in these programs to actually get rehabilitated, but I didn't think that sounded very good. And the other side to that is the reason they cut it is because they don't have the room. So if they close this, where are they going to go? I mean, they're not full because there's room at other jails, or they would be sending those inmates to other jail systems. So just wanted to bring that up. I thought it kind of hit me today when I learned that. So thank you again for speaking today, and thank you, Chairman.
One quick comment to that. In addition to that, some of those inmates have to be in a singular, could be a 2-bedded cell, but they have to be isolated because of behavioral problems and the inability to get around, which does cause the need for more space. Thank you for bringing that up.
Senator Dush.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for the invitation to be a part of this House panel. Gentlemen, I know when I've questioned the administration about how many of these projects that are part of that $72 million, I've still not received any information from the department. And from what we've seen today going through the institution, it appears like a lot of those have been either completed or already let out on contract to be completed. Have either of you received any information from the department as to what the actual number is that still needs to be done?
The best information I received was today by the people that work there, and what I can see visually. We've not got anything on paper from anything from the administration.
I'm in the same boat.
Yeah, what's interesting to me is the only information I've received back was from the department was how much it costs per day to house the inmates at Rockview. It's $160 a day, and versus $206 down at SCI Chester, and we've got the second lowest recidivism rate among all the SCIs right here at Rockview. Our purpose, as a former corrections officer, our purpose is to try and get people out into the communities again, and we're not getting any kind of response from the department of those questions.
Representative Diorsi.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Chairman Benninghoff and Rep. Kephart, for your testimony. I just want to echo just the economic impact here. On my count, it's 658 people at Rockview, 244 at Kuhana. Family sustaining jobs, my calculation has that at a little bit over 900. Certainly many folks in your districts, but to my left, Representative Borowitz and Representative Flick, we were chatting before the hearing started here. It would affect folks in their district as well. But I want to ask you two, I'm thinking even a little bit more down the line. What kinds of local or small businesses rely on the facility and its workforce, and can you give a prognostication if these closures were to close on the long-term economic outcome it may have?
Well, thank you, Representative Diorsi. So in Kohanna, it would be the Carthus area, and like I mentioned in my testimony, Nigeria flooring is right up there, and they were worried about being in jeopardy if it would go away because they they're up there with them. It's sort of when I say remote area, I mean, there's not a whole lot up there besides the facility and so forth. Very rural. There's more elk than people, to give you an idea. So, yeah, they would be in jeopardy. By the way, there's a gas station down there. There's a Quehanna Motor Lodge in the area. All people that would potentially be affected by this. Like I said, also it's important to consider 80% of the employees live in Carthage Township. They get a local income tax off of them. I think I heard someone say the other night when we were at our DOC hearing that it would be like, I think it was the solicitor for the township said over $11,000 in tax revenue loss, which is a lot for a community of 800 people. So, by the way, a lot of them are on fixed incomes that, and that's just the people who actually work there, the 80%, their families and so forth work or live down there too. So, yeah, definitely local businesses would be impacting local tax revenue.
Quick follow-up, keep in mind, I'm pretty fiscally conservative, and I don't necessarily like to look at corrections as a money-making thing, but there is reality that the whole ability to be self-sustaining has changed over the last 100 years. We don't grow much of the produce there anymore. They don't really raise that much animal anymore for intake by the inmates. We generally require the people that work there to eat there as well because of safety and contraband issues. So by closing this particular institution does not necessarily reduce the cost because you still have to feed people and you still have to take care of property. It's just a different location. And if perchance it were to go to Chester, as the Senator talked about being a little cheaper per inmate, you're making a relatively wealthier community even more wealthy. Here, our ambulance association, our police, not our police, but our hospitals providing medical care. We have a business right down the road, Penwood, for their forestry department. If they need any kind of tools, equipment, or something repaired, it's within 2 miles away. There's always trickle-down economy to that. And obviously the neighbors are paying attention to that. Our local chamber is paying attention to that because they know that this is not just an employee base for Bellefonte or Clearfield. It's systemic for probably 4 or 5 surrounding counties of each of us.
Representative Marcel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you very much to our colleagues for joining us today and inviting us here for the tour, for the hearing. I know that Representative Kephart mentioned me traveling. I traveled over 200 miles to be here, and I'm really glad that I did because I think that it's really important to see facilities before making any decisions. For us to sit in Harrisburg and make decisions without ever stepping foot in a location isn't the right way to go. And so I'm really happy that I made the drive early this morning. So I just wanted to thank you for inviting us and bringing us here. As a member of the House Appropriations Committee, we asked a lot of questions about this during the budget hearings, but this is really a better time for us to be considering it. One, because we were able to talk about the recidivism, the workforce and training programs, which were great. I was able to better understand the space and utilization, which I did not understand until we walked through all of the different buildings today. And then finally, I personally just have to mention that I'm really frustrated that House and Senate members and members of the appropriations committees are not able to get the information that they have asked for, whether it relates to work being done, who are the members of the steering committee. There are a lot of things that just don't add up, in my opinion. And so seeing paved roads that are better than a lot of the roads in my district, maybe PennDOT can talk to everyone. Those... Yeah, and so, so it's just, it's frustrating to me to hear that there are all these disconnects. We have a lot of transparency and accountability problems in Harrisburg, whether it's deleted emails or information that we ask for that we can't get. And so my question is, how can we get information for our members and your constituents on this matter? Is it writing letters? Is it doing press conferences? What can we do? Because clearly our colleagues and other people need to know more about this before a decision is made.
I wish I had one magic answer to snap my fingers and tell you today, but I would tell you it's a matter of urgency. I believe I've heard rumors that the Corrections wants to make a decision by end of May, early June. We may not even have a budget by then. I'll be surprised if we do. There's a growing concern, obviously, about wanting to spend $3.6 billion more dollars on one hand and yet close a facility, mothball it down for $10 million of expenditures, which we don't even know if those numbers are accurate. I think you have to lean more on the administration. Unfortunately, some of this is happening after the hearings, so to be able to get corrections, the chairman and his staff reached out to them. We wanted to give them an opportunity, and it was at the end of March that we made that request, give them some time. I can't imagine with all the administration I saw sitting at the hearings, one of those 12 people couldn't have been here today, but they must be very busy. I don't have a simple answer, but you know where the movers and shakers are, but I would talk to our chairman on both sides of the aisle and say, listen, we need to hold up because this is a lot of money, and there is available money if we were better stewards of the property of this state. And it's embarrassing to the people sitting behind me that are paying the taxes, who are also worried about losing their jobs to be able to have the money to pay taxes, that we have buildings sitting around, tens of millions, which we'll hear a little bit more from one of our later testifiers. It's not pennies. It's irresponsible.
Well, thank you for that. And whatever we need to do to get the answers that we need to make this decision, it needs to happen. So I'm all in. So just let me know what you guys need.
This
Thank
should
you
be
very
a
much.
legislative decision, not just a commission, but that's my opinion.
So I don't have a perfect answer either, but Representative Marcel, the fact that you came 200 miles, you probably came through Harrisburg on the way, I believe so, right? Well, I can guarantee that the governor has never been to Quahana, and he's the guy doing this. So the fact that you made that comment that you wanted to actually see the facilities before they're shut down, maybe the governor should do the same.
Senator Langeholk.
Thank you. Thank you, Representatives, for your advocacy as well as your teamwork on this issue. I want to build a little bit on your testimony and then also on the heels of the testimony of Representative with regard to transparency. I have maintained from the outset that Quahana has the lowest recidivism rates in the Commonwealth. I brought that to the attention at the Senate Appropriations Committee hearing when they testified under oath before our committee and disagreed with the recidivism rates that I brought forth, which were actually, ironically, from a boot camp pamphlet that was put out by, I believe, the department. They disagreed with my numbers then, and then about a month and a half later, when we had the public hearing at Quahana here last week, again disputed those. So much so that in their initial comments, one of the deputy secretaries pointed that out, saying that the recidivism rates were not what were portrayed in the appropriations hearing. Ironically, to date, we have received, after multiple requests, no hard numbers from the department. So do you have anything that you add? Have you gotten any information? I'm assuming you have not gotten any numbers, and I'm going to talk about the efforts you have made with regard to that transparency.
Yes, Senator Langerholk. So like you, I have not gotten any official numbers of recently. They're saying that those numbers were wrong that you brought forward, and that's what I mentioned in my report. I can only go by what's available to the public, and they keep saying recently that those numbers aren't true, but yet they won't produce the numbers. So I'm only left to give by their reports.
Thank you, Senator. Representative Miller.
Thank you. I just want to give a comment about what Representative Kephart said, that I got a call from a mom in my district who sang the praises of the Quahana facility as being the key element that changed the course of the direction of her son, and in fact saved his life, and recounted others in her testimony to me, and I encouraged her to give a call to Representative Kephart as well. And we're talking about savings of numbers, a $5 million investment to turn around and save $104 million. That's all well and good and very important. We should be doing that. But this is ultimately about lives, and the statistics that you brought forth about 9 to 18% reduction in the recidivism is substantial. We're talking about lives and people. And I was going to ask, my question, Mr. Chairman, was simply this: has the governor ever been to either of the facilities that we were at?
I'm not aware of him being in Rockview.
And I'm pretty sure he hasn't been in Quahana.
Well, I would agree that
I've relayed my invite to them, by the way.
And I would agree that this would be important that they actually come in and lay eyes on the facilities, talk to the people, and see what's happening before they make such a decision. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I was thinking the irony of all the repairs we saw and the millions of dollars been spent, and now they want to tear a facility down or at least abandon it, and yet you and I serve in Harrisburg in a building that's older than that. Doesn't add up.
Well said. I think a gubernatorial visit to either of these or both of these facilities would definitely be in order. When you walk through the facility talking to some of the inmates there, some of those inmates have resided there for decades. That has become, to a degree, their home. And I know that we had conversations when the state center closures were happening a couple of years ago about the real impact of transfer trauma. When you move somebody from a location that has been their home for such a long amount of time, you set them up for failure in the long run. I know we talked to individuals who worked on site who told us that the inmates there have sent hundreds of letters to the department, to central office, saying, hey, this place is working for us. We'd like to stay. And I think that really speaks to the excellent work that these facilities are doing. I know the governor is trying to cut costs, but the question is, at what cost? When you talk about the impact of lost positive impact on the lives of people who go to the boot camp, or when you talk about the excellent recidivism rate that Rockview can claim, we have to have a bigger conversation about what the cost is to these cost cuts. I want to thank both of you, Chairman Benninghoff, Representative Kephart, for your time. We're going to move on to our second panel now, if you guys would like to join us up here. I'm going to go ahead and call forward Mr. Greg Scott, again, to reintroduce, who is the President and CEO of the Center County Chamber of Commerce. I'm going to call up Mr. John Eckenrode, who is the President of the Pennsylvania State Correctional Officers Association, Mr. Stephen Clark, who is the Pennsylvania State Correctional Officers Association Local President at SCI Rockview. I'm going to call up Ms. Elisa Liptak, who is a corrections officer at the Quahana Boot Camp, as well as Mr. Frazier Blake, who is a retired commander from the Quahana Boot Camp. Thank you all very much for being here today. We're going to start off. Mr. Scott, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman Rowe, Representative Benninghoff, Representative Kephart, and members of the committee. My name is Greg Scott, and I'm the President and CEO of the Chamber of Business and Industry of Center County. I appreciate the opportunity to provide testimony today on the impacts of the proposed SCI Rockview closure on Center County and our neighboring counties. As the lead economic development organization serving Center County, CBICC works closely with businesses, policymakers, and community stakeholders to build a robust economy, drive workforce and community development, and ensure our area remains a great place to live and work. To that effect, we recently led a strategic planning process resulting in Center County's first economic development strategic plan in more than 20 years. The plan outlines actions and opportunities for smart economic growth across Center County. It is my hope that this plan can be used to chart a path forward and make our communities more resilient in the face of potential large-scale changes. This work is personal to me because I was born and raised in Center County. I went to Bald Eagle Area High School and Penn State. When I think back to growing up here, there are three landmarks that come to mind: Beaver Stadium, the Nittany Mall, and Rockview. For generations, SCI Rockview has been a pillar of this community and a source of stability both for families and the local economy. Like many who grew up here, I have family and friends who have worked at Rockview or have been involved with the institution in some capacity. Through hearing their experiences and by attending Representative Paul Takak's community listening sessions and engaging with our Center County commissioners, I've come to understand the significance of SCI Rockview on our economy and communities and how devastating its closure would be. The proposed closure of SCI Rockview would affect 658 jobs directly, as you know. If Kehana boot camp is also closed, that number rises to 892 jobs lost. These are more than just numbers. They represent workers in and around Center County and their households, their families, and their livelihoods. Many of these workers have spouses and family members who would likely leave the area if similar placements are not available at SCI Benner, compounding the loss. In a letter to the State Department of Corrections, the Center County Commissioners estimate a $118 million annual economic impact from Rockview's potential closure. The trickle down would be immense. Over $50 million in lost wages, nearly $36 million in spin-off job losses, and $32 million in lost local purchasing power. Local shops, restaurants, and other small businesses and service providers that rely on Rockview employee spending would lose up to 658 customers essentially overnight. Additionally, suppliers that deliver goods to SCI Rockview and contractors and local businesses that help maintain the facility would lose a key client, hitting their bottom line and potentially impacting their ability to remain operational and serve our community. One topic that was repeated consistently across Representative Takak's community listening sessions is about the value generated from within Rockview's walls. The forestry unit alone generates $300,000 in economic activity annually. In addition, SCI Rockview provides meaningful community service across Center County. Inmates build furniture for state parks and offices, paint churches, build pews, and help maintain public spaces. At a recent listening session in Howard, a Rockview vocational program employee estimated that more than 1,000 work hours per month are spent supporting municipalities, nonprofits, and community events. Think of the Center County Grange Fair, an event that brings in $21 million over just 10 days. This event would not be possible at the current scale without Rockview's support. Inmates work for 6 to 7 weeks leading up to the event, largely handling construction and setup. Without their labor, much of the responsibility would fall to volunteers who may lack the time, equipment, and resources to fill the gap. Center County has already endured loss of major manufacturer employers in the region. We can't afford another massive loss like the Corning factory closure, especially when Center County is projected to grow by nearly 20,000 residents by 2050. There is also a question of what comes next in the event of closure. In the past, facilities across the state have remained unused, incurring costs for the state without a clear plan for redevelopment or disposal. I hope that if the state decides to close a portion or the entire SCA Rockview facility, a transparent and well-developed plan is communicated to ensure we are able to coordinate our efforts to maximize economic potential of the site and make it work for our communities. Finally, I want to echo a critical point made by our county commissioners. The state's projected $120 million in annual savings from closing Rockview and Quiana may be misleading. It seems possible that many of the capital improvements used to justify closure have already been completed or are underway. If these costs have already been accounted for, the long-term consequences of a closure may outweigh any short-term savings. Additionally, the ripple effect across the entire Department of Corrections will be significant, from workforce disruptions, staff shortages, and increased overtime to a loss of morale among employees who consistently describe Rockview as a high-quality, team-oriented workplace. Ultimately, the proposal to close Rockview and the boot camp will greatly impact Center, Clearfield, and Clinton counties, as well as others, and the people who live and work here, many of whom have contributed to our local economy and communities for generations. Thank you again for your time today. I hope my remarks have proven helpful in understanding the immense and complex economic and community impact that the closure of SCI Rockview would have. As a longtime member of the Center County community and the leader of the county's economic development organization, I thank you for your attention to this issue and advocacy on the community's behalf. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. President Eckenrode.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much for having this, members of the committee. Thanks for coming. I did provide written testimony to the committee. I'm going to summarize my testimony and do my best to stay within the 5-minute limit. I think it's important for the governor and for members of the assembly to hear what this impact is going to have on the community. And a big part of my focus is on what impact this is going to have on the people that actually work at both of these facilities. It's been said, promised, that every employee will have a job. And basically what they did is they took a pin and they put it in a map in the middle of each prison. And they created a 67-mile bubble. But what they don't take into account is the individual. It sounds great on paper, but there are people that live outside of that bubble already that are already driving upwards of 60 miles to go to work. And this is seniority driven. So you don't necessarily just get to pick where you want to go. It's determined by how much time you actually have in the state system. And if I'm already driving 60 miles to work and now I have to drive an additional 60 miles, we're talking about 120 miles, upwards of 100 miles. You're talking about more time in the car away from your family. And this is a very tough job. It takes a toll on yourself. It takes a toll on your family. And part of that decompression is you got to get out of these places and you got to go spend time with the people who care about you when you get home. And that's going to detract from that, number one. Number two, you go from a 60-mile drive or a 30-mile drive to whatever you're going to, it's a financial impact also. So it's definitely going to have an impact on the people. A lot of people don't understand that we're a 24/7 operation. And being a 24/7 operation, we do shift work. And once again, shifts are determined by seniority, how much time you actually have in the Commonwealth. There's people that have 20-plus years in that are setting in premium shifts, and that works for them and their family. There's junior people that are waiting to get some of these more premium shifts so that they can spend time at home with their family. And that is put in jeopardy when you close these people and displace them and make them go somewhere else. So that definitely has a toll. It definitely takes a toll on the individual, and it takes a toll on the people that care about you when you get home. Impact on the community. There's several people here that are going to talk about that today. Has an impact on local businesses. It has an impact on the tax base in the area. There are plenty of local businesses that have procured contracts for both of these facilities to provide services, and they'll be gone. I think a thing that we don't really pay attention to or don't think about is this is generational. There's people that are going to stay in the area, and they're going to commute and go wherever they need to go to take care of their family. But once those people retire, quit, move on, do something different, whatever is going to take them down their life path, those people are gone forever, and we're not getting them back because there's no new jobs coming into the area through these two facilities if they do close. So it's generational. I've been saying this from day one, and I will continue to harp on this until I turn blue in the face and pass out. This is definitely going to have safety implications on the people that work at the current 2 jails that we're talking about, number one. Number two, it's going to have an impact on jails across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. We are tasked with care, custody, and control of inmates. That includes intervening when inmates prey upon each other, when there's physical assaults that happen, inmate on inmate. It's our job to jump in there and stop that from happening. And a lot of times when we do that, that violence is turned against us. And we're going to close these jails. We're going to throw 2,500 plus inmates into these other facilities, and that's going to bring our individual jail populations up. I've been doing this for 26 years. I'm a sergeant at SCI Benner Township. Anytime we move mass amounts of inmates like we're planning on doing, if this does happen, we're going to increase the individual population, and I promise you we will see violence in other institutions. The Department of Corrections presented their budget to both appropriation committees, and we're asking for more money, even though we plan on possibly closing these facilities. I can't deny that some of that increase is due to wage increase, but we are dumping millions of dollars into treatment programs that we know and we can show do not work, but we continue to waste money on those programs, and we're getting very poor results. All we need to do is look at our recidivism rate. We've talked about that a little bit before. 40% recidivism rate in the first year, and I think it's close to 65% within the first 3 years of being released from prison. We're spending upwards of $100 million on a Suboxone program. We are passing narcotics to inmates inside of our facilities. It's absolutely incredible and ridiculous. I said to the Secretary of Corrections the other night at the Quahana closure meeting, there's more than one way to skin a cat. You know, I understand that we have a fiscal responsibility to the taxpayers of Pennsylvania to make sure that we are spending money appropriately. We need to get creative. We need to do some research, and I believe that we can identify programs and money that's being spent currently that we can cut. I don't know that I can get us to $120 million or whoever can get us to $120 million a year in cost savings, but I think we can put a hell of a dent in it. And it's unfortunate. Our department is very reactive instead of proactive, and we need to be proactive, and I don't think that we're doing that. There's no amount of money that we can cut through however we cut it that is worth the money of putting people's safety at risk. And by closing these jails, if this does happen, we are putting inmates at risk, and I believe more importantly, we're putting the good people, the men and women in the Commonwealth that walk in that jail every day, or those jails, and put their life on the line to service this Commonwealth. And I don't think you can put a price tag on that. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I thank you for your time, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, President Eckenrode. President Clark.
Yes, sir. Thank you. My name is Steve Clark. I started my corrections career at SCI Rockview in 2004. On February 4th, 2025, the department announced their intention to close 2 state prisons. On February 7th, the appointed steering committee released a 6-page report identifying SCI Rockview as one of the jails targeted for closure. The 6-page report listed several reasons why SCI Rockview was being considered, to include the need for approximately $74 million in upgrades over the next 5 years. The committee cited several needed projects in their report that have already been completed or paid for, including what they called crucial projects such as repairs, roof repairs, water lines and shower facilities, boiler systems, and etc. The committee goes on to say that the facility cannot easily accommodate inmates with wheelchairs and has limited cells designed for handicapped inmates. Lastly, the multi-tiered housing units, there are limited lines of sight and limited opportunities for supervision. I'm here today to kind of contradict some of the alleged report. There have been many security enhancements put up in SCI Rockview over the last 5 years. Over the last 20 years, there's been a lot. But over the last 5, they've done a tremendous amount of things, including installing the new fence system with the new PIDs, which is the electronics that go between the fences. They've installed over 500 cameras throughout the facility. All have been updated within the last couple years. Allegedly, we're on the top of the echelon of the technological cameras that are available. That takes away a lot of the restriction on limited access to our limited line of sight. The repaving of all the parking lots and roads is all done today. A lot of you guys were there today and saw that. I mean, it's all been done. You guys saw the new roofs and the new wing that was built on G Block and the new yards that are being constructed as we speak. The new water lines and steam lines that have been installed have been done. You guys saw the repairs to the culinary building and all the upgrades that have been done there. Those are all things that they're saying that we need that you guys saw that are already done. So, even up to and including, we've installed new LED lights throughout the facility for the outside lights for all the perimeters and stuff. And the boiler house, they say, was one of the big things. That was a need, not a want. Or a want, not a need, I'm sorry. The boiler house was converted to gas from coal in 2005. The first boiler was put in, the second boiler was put in 2014. So neither of them are detrimental to the prison. 7 out of the 9 housing units are wheelchair accessible. Now they do talk about some of the wheelchair accessibility in the cells. Most of that could be done by our maintenance department for very limited costs if they wanted to add cells to that list. Rockview, from a safety standpoint, boasts some of the fastest response times in the state. You know, we pride ourselves on that. That's something we carry very heavy in our hearts. You know, from the time, they average around 20 seconds from the time a radio call to the first response. I attribute a lot of that to the layout of Rockview, as you guys saw today that we're there today. It's a very open layout through a lot of it. We can get from place to place pretty quick comparative to other institutions. But I also dedicate that to the men and women that work there that, you know, are willing to go for each other. And despite their claims, Rockview doesn't have a tremendous amount of structural issues. You know, the buildings there with a little maintenance and upkeep will probably last another 100 years. I mean, they were built different back then. So with that, that's pretty much everything I have to say. I thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Ms. Liptak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for hearing us out today. Great. Is that better? Okay, great. I've spent nearly 13 years at the Quahana Boot Camp helping rehabilitate incarcerated individuals of the Commonwealth, allowing them to re-enter their communities as productive members of our society. In early February, scrolling social media, I found numerous articles being published by the local outlets related to the proposed closures of the Quahana Boot Camp and SCI Rockview, respectively. Yes, I was notified that there was a proposal to close my institution via Facebook. Beginning to process what was happening and read through the pages and pages of information and quote-unquote facts, I'd come to the conclusion that those affiliated with the Quahana Boot Camp didn't match the facility as I worked in it on a day-to-day basis. As you do more of a deep dive into the information provided by the steering committee's report, you'll see that it's not factual. It's just not true, period. The projects that are cited as upcoming expenses don't exist or have over the past few years been completely finished. Example, in 2024, the facility finished a new multi-million-dollar annex that includes a brand new visiting room, the likes of which our inmates and their families have never been afforded before. It also has a state-of-the-art training room dedicated to just that, the professional development of our staff and our officers. I've had the opportunity to instruct in it often, and I too, Representative Kephart, know exactly how beautiful our facility is. I'm disappointed that our department would publish and publicly release a document that is so blatantly false, all the while dismissing or leaving out, perhaps by design, the incredible accomplishments of the institution, its staff, and inmates alike. It's disgusting to see such an economically destructive and impactful decision on our very small region being made on a foundation of nothing more than untruths. In addition to all of this, avoiding any transparency and refusing to answer any questions related to who these committee members are that are making such a serious proposal. I would eventually come to the realization that I had encountered the one person made known through this process, the author of the steering committee's report. He and I were acquainted at an arbitration hearing at Quahana. He would go on to testify that day against female correctional officers being paid double time when mandated out of turn, although male correction officers were afforded that wage in the same circumstance as was contracted by the PSCOA. That is not the type of man you forget as a woman pursuing career goals in a correctional facility. I don't understand what the drive or motivations to close the Quahana Boot Camp truly are, or why such carelessness in the reporting as it relates to the inaccurate information released in the committee's report are. What I do know is that Dr. Harry trusted and appointed this committee to represent an honest assessment of our department. And unfortunately, much like the day he testified the women at Quahana were undeserving of fair and equal wage, his proposal would dictate that this body, the hundreds of correctional staff and families it affects, and your tax-paying constituents, every single one of you sitting there, that they too are undeserving of the fairness, that they too were undeserving of authenticity, and most importantly, that they too were not deserving of the integrity of this report. Thank you again, and I look forward to any questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Liptak. Mr. Blake.
Can you hear me? Okay, my name is Fraser Blake. I'm a prior boot camp commander. I just retired actually this month. It'll be a year ago from the boot camp program. I had a total of 31 years in the department. And actually worked as, when I started SEI Waymart up in Carbon County or somewhere up there, and I came to the boot camp in 1994. And as I say in that brief when I was doing the briefing for the town hall, I was actually the first black officer working in the boot camp program. I was actually the first one. And I told them, I said, you don't need a black officer, you need a good officer, and they hired me the same day. I actually worked there up until SEI Housedale opened, and I actually went to SEI Housedale in another capacity, and I stayed there 15 years at SEI Housedale. So I've seen both facets of the program. I came back to Quahana Boot Camp in 2011 as a major, and I worked up to the commander for the boot camp program. I'm retired, but I feel very strongly about what's happening with this program. I'm originally from South Carolina, but I live in Clearfield County, and I've been in Clearfield County for a long time. A lot of people know me. I've been living this for a long time, and I care very much for the people that's happening to. So I'm here on my own, not because somebody twisted my arm. I'm here on my own to talk about it. So this is what I'm going to say, okay? I got to put my glasses on. The Quahana Boot Camp opened in 1991 as the Department of Corrections' first military-style motivational boot camp. Inmates assigned to the boot camp undergo a rigid 6-month disciplinary and training program. In addition to the boot camp program, the facility is the primary facility for the state drug treatment program. That's called SDTP. And it accommodates both male and female. You know, so we're one of the only facilities that has male and females at the same facility. My prior facility. The boot camp program is a 6-month program with a drug and alcohol treatment component. It focuses on discipline, cognitive therapy, work ethic, reentry services. A typical day includes physical training, work, education, and treatment services. If inmates successfully complete the program, they are granted automatic parole and will continue serving the remainder of their sentence under intensive parole supervision. And I'm going to say what happened in 2019, a collection of bills commonly known as Justice Reinvestive Initiative 2, called JRI 2, were passed into law, which change how select DOC programs operate. Under JRI 2, the boot camp numbers have declined significantly. And why? The boot camp program was not updated when the JRI 2 was enacted, which hurts the boot camp program and enhances SDTP. How? Sentence length for boot camp cannot be over 3 years on the minimum and 5 years on the maximum. Sentence length for SDTP cannot be over 6 years on the minimum and 10 years on the maximum. This maximum can be extended with approval and approved recommendation. Candidates must be within 2 years of the minimum to enter either program. SDTP is a flat 2-year sentence regardless of their original maximum date. A flat 2-year sentence for SDTP. Boot camp inmates must finish their maximum sentence under intensive parole supervision. Boot camp caps the age of participation at 40 on the day the inmate begins the program. And SDTP does not have an age limit at all. SDTP permits inmates to return to an SCI if the violation occurs as a reassessment and stays in the program with a second chance. Remember, SDP gets second chance. Boot camp inmates that violate may get a pro hit, which we call they go back to jail, and return to the SCI without a second chance. The legislation for the boot camp program needs to be revised. Furthermore, the SDTP needs a few major revisions also. Where and how? The boot camp program maximum sentence length is no more than 5 years. They should mimic SDTP with a flat sentence also. but continue to be supervised by parole. The maximum age for a boot camp program inmate should be 42 and up to 45 with a waiver, because judges can give waivers. Due to the STP not being supervised by parole, SDTP should not be permitted in a program with with a firearm charge. STP inmates are supervised by the DOC and their contractor facilities. This is not intensive supervision, it's minimal supervision. The DOC does not permit an SDTP inmate to work while participating in the therapeutic community. Remember, they don't permit them to work. SDTP inmates leave facilities with no work ethic, experience, and are we not trying to better these individuals to be productive citizens upon release? TC hours are from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. Monday through Friday. When they are released into the community, they will not be in treatment 9 hours a day. They will need to work. Why is the DOC setting them up for failure by not permitting them to work and learn a trade while they're being in a treatment program? At Quahana, the schedule permits it. Structure the day the same day as a boot camp program. They need to structure it. Work, school, a half a day, and treatment half a day. Teaches them how to manage life upon release. Permit SDTP inmates to participate more in vocational programming, training. If there is a minimum on the required hours, needs to complete a TC, this program can be done in 6 months within a TC, which would permit inmates to get their required treatment hours, a job skill simultaneously, save money by not sending them to a 2-month rehab upon completion of a TC, enhance what they get while incarcerated. The department had right before I retired, they had to call it a static risk offender needs guide. It's called a revised, they call it a strong R. It's a risk assessment instrument used by the department to classify inmates and predict their risks for reoffending. It is intended to replace the LSIR, which is a level of service. I've been retired, but it's LSIR, which has been used by the DOC and parole board with the goal of improving liability, validity, and facilitating reentry and enhancing case management. These assessments can be easily manipulated by inmates to ensure their chances of getting into SDTP are greater than entering any other program, mainly the boot camp program. They want the 2-year flat. Everybody want to get out early. This has increased the number of SDTP greatly over the past years. This program is designed for those with substance abuse issues, not drug dealers, with no substance abuse history at all. DOC is releasing inmates back to the community with little to no assistance with improving the thinking that they brought them to the prison initially. The DOC is wasting taxpayers' money on inappropriate programming and useless assessments. The old assessments were harder to manipulate. The DOC spent millions of dollars on this assessment that is easily manipulated. This also needs to be looked into. I want to also state that, there's a bunch of people up at Quahana that are seasoned staff that know how the boot camp operate. They know it, but sometimes I think they're not involved in this. It's the people down in Harrisburg involved in the decision making. They don't really want to pull the Quahana people involved in it. I think they should be involved in it, and with the legislators and with a committee, it would do wonders, because you got the people that are doing it. They have the great ideas, and they notice they know better about what works than working the program day in and day out. Quahana Boot Camp is worth saving. I repeat, Quahana Boot Camp is worth saving. You will never find a more dedicated staff than those working in Quahana. Excellence is not an option. It is our standard, and thank you for your time, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Blake. I do want to mention that we have been joined by Representative Nelson from the 57th Legislative District in Westmoreland County. We're going to go to questions now from some of our members, and I would just like to remind the members we do have several questions, so keep those questions short and sweet. For our panelists, you might be asked a question directly from a member, or the member might ask the group as a whole. You're not obligated to answer every question, but we are, of course, here to hear from you, so feel free to chime in if you've got something to add. I'm going to use Chairman's prerogative and go first. I wanted to ask a little bit more about the steering committee. So, this whole thing, like you said, finding out from a Facebook post, right? The good chairman said that he found out about it from the governor's budget address. We don't get told anything. So who is the steering committee? Who appoints them? How comprehensive was their report? And I know you referenced some of the inconsistencies. The report says we need to do this, but that's done. I know we stood on the road that needed to be repaved, and it looks nicer than my own driveway does. So who is the steering committee?
Well, the problem, Mr. Chair, is we don't know. Other than the person that signed the meager 6-page report that was released, identifying these two facilities as proposed closure jails. I have personally done right-to-know requests. I did get those requests back, and the answer that I got was, you're not privy to this information. We don't need to tell you. So we still don't know who's on these committees. And we're basing, potentially closing two facilities that's going to affect 1,000 employees based off of a 6-page report that was authored by people that we don't even know, number one. Number two, they contracted out a company called CGL. I think they're based, if I remember correctly, and I hope I'm not wrong, out of Ohio. We have no idea how much money they paid them to help out with this study. I asked for notes, any minutes that were taken at meetings. I've got no answer whatsoever.
So as far as we know, there's a reason they're so inconsistent in their report, because as far as we know, these people have never actually even been on site. Or they might have been, we might not. Again, the whole point of this hearing is the complete lack of transparency in the process, and this is hardly a way to make a decision that will impact the lives of so many people. I'm going to go to Representative Brenda Pugh.
Thank you, Chairman. And I'm glad you hit on that. I'm wondering what other decisions are being made that nobody's actually showing up and inspecting a property yet putting a report out. I'd be very interested in finding out who's on this committee making these decisions. As a general statement, I want to say I don't think the general public has any idea what takes place inside your prisons and how much you actually do. Your addiction specialists, your educators, your teaching trades, your mental health specialists, and I've been impressed. I'm very fortunate to have SCI Dallas in my district. So every facility that I've been into, I've never seen anything but respect between the inmates and the guards that are working in there, the corrections officers. So thank you for that. Mr. Scott, I'm touching on you a little bit here. Being a past chairman president myself, a fair chairman, and a real estate agent, I think these potential 892 layoffs are much more than 892 people. You're going to be affecting their families. You're going to be affecting, if they get relocated into other areas, vacant homes, and an onslaught of values going down. I have a real concern about this and how deep you think it's going to go. You know this area better than I do.
It's a great question. I'll share just a really quick story from one of the listening sessions I was at recently, where one of the spouses of one of the correction officers stood up, was a resident of State College, she and her husband, and was deeply concerned about her husband needing to relocate 67 miles away, either the impact that's going to have on the family if he's away, his seniority, now having to work shift work maybe at night, not being able to be around their young children. But she's a school teacher in the area, and she shared that she may have to leave. So we've lost not only the 892 jobs, but now we lost, and I don't know what that's multiplied by. So that, yes, they're going to need to find a new home, set up a new life. It was very impactful to hear that, and I'm sure that's just one of many stories that we're going to hear. So it will have an impact. I mean, you mentioned real estate and what that looks like with families moving out and needing to move on. It's definitely a concern. How deeply that impact is on the real estate side, I'm not exactly sure. I just know that losing that number of jobs in a community is going to have an impact, and it's going to have a ripple impact. It's not just the 658 jobs that we have here in Center County, but it's beyond just those 658 jobs.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And then one more thing. When you pick up and move this number of inmates, because I think there's 2,112 just at Rockview alone, correct? There's an impact moving them into other prisons, right? I mean, it's a neighborhood effect type deal. I see it being a problem.
Yeah, I mean, the Department of Corrections is going to make a determination on where the inmates go, but they will be dispersed across the Commonwealth, depending on what their custody level is, what kind of programming they need. Somebody asked me, where are these programs going to end up? I can't answer that. I don't know. I wish I did. I wish they would tell us a little bit more information than what we're getting, a lot more information than what we're getting. But eventually those inmates are going to get dispersed across the Commonwealth.
Okay, thank you. And I'd love to be part of helping let people know what it is you actually do inside of our prisons. I think it's important.
Thank you. Representative Borowitz.
Thank you, Chairman. Grateful to be here today. When I first got in office, one of the first things I did was somehow I got connected with John and wanted to go tour the prisons. And it changed my outlook like it has today with many of these representatives. It's the steering committee, number one. That's why I try to come down to government and vote against government committees and government boards, because there's no transparency. So what a joke. Maybe the governor can get on his state plane that we're probably paying millions of dollars and fly down here and actually see this facility. The question I have is for Mr. Scott. There's always ulterior motives usually with politicians. So have you heard any insight being a part of the chamber here in Center County? Because we certainly haven't, but I do have inclinations. Who wants the ground and what for?
I have not heard of any inclinations. Of course, rumors are everywhere about what the use of that property could be. I will say, I mentioned in my testimony that we recently went through an effort to develop a Center County economic development strategy. In that strategy, we completed that last fall. It identified Rockview and property at Rockview as an opportunity for us for economic growth. There's underutilized land there that could be moved back into the local control and developed for the community. But there have not been any discussions or anything that I've heard of that presumes that land would be used for something. I think first and foremost, I think there's an opportunity here for a win-win, which would be keep SCI Rockview open and reference our strategic plan, which would say, let's take some of that unutilized land and convert it into economic development opportunities for us as a community. Again, that would not impact Rockview at all and the operations there the way that it's done today. So that's the way that I'm approaching it. But phase one is, can we save the facility now, save the jobs, if there is a time down the road where either A, it does go to closure, we have those conversations about meaningful. I'm deeply concerned of what that facility would sit there, much like referenced other facilities that have been closed, and would that become a blight on our community? How can we use that for good? But as of now, I have not heard of any alternative ideas or motives for using that land.
Okay. And my other question was for Representative Pugh kind of took in. It was for Mr. Eckenrode about just taking these amount of prisoners and placing them. Is there even room in other prisons, state prisons, for that? And again, I am obviously, this affects, I'm over Clinton County now, but I was over Center County, so this affects my constituents. Multiple jobs. I already talked to a friend that retired early, and so we don't want to see these closed. So, but she kind of took my question, you answered it, but I mean, 2,500 inmates, that's a lot to relocate, so.
I wish I could get my dates straight for you, but at one point in time, and you can go on the Department of Corrections website, and you'll find population reports monthly, and you can go back as far as probably 2020 to find these reports. December of 23, I believe, or January of 24, like right in that time frame, We had a certain number of beds that were listed by the Department of Corrections. Those beds were either full, empty, or both. Within a year's time, that number increased by somewhere in the neighborhood of 7,000. There was no new construction. We didn't build any new prisons. Where did these beds come from? So the claim is, yes, there are beds in facilities across the Commonwealth, and we do have some. But I just find it highly irregular that we went from we had a net gain of somewhere in the neighborhood of 7,000 beds in a year without no new construction.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Representative Flick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question, Mr. Eckenrode, is for you or for any of the panelists, and thank you all for testifying today. Last week I was at Muncie SCI. Next week I'll be at Cole Township, so I really enjoy these visits. We talked a lot today about drug and alcohol, about mental health, and about recidivism. So my background before becoming a rep 2 years ago was writing recidivism software for a number of counties at the county level in county jails, where we would get MOUs between mental health, drug and alcohol, and the county jails and see if it works. And it does work. And I know, John, that you had mentioned the cost of these treatments and that they are not overly successful. And we are here today to talk about funding. So I also serve on the Opioid Misuse and Addiction Abatement Trust. So there's only 13 people in the whole state, only 2 state representatives. I would love to see that money, which the governor, when he was AG, to give him a little credit, got us $1.06 billion. I would like to see some of that drug and alcohol money, because it's not taxpayer money, right? It's big pharma money. It came from Johnson & Johnson. It came from CVS. It came from Purdue. I would like to see some of that, which is known as Exhibit E, put into funding so you're not paying, so the jails and the SCIs are not paying for these recidivism studies and to get mental health caseworkers and get drug and alcohol. I think we need them, and I think it's working, but it's expensive. So these treatment dollars, I would like to see part of the opioid settlement money used for that. I just want to get your comments and your thoughts on that for
I
anybody.
think it's a great idea. I don't know that anybody's ever had that approach before. And I just want to clarify myself. We have many, many treatment programs in each facility across the Commonwealth. We, I think, get misidentified as people who don't want treatment in our facilities, and we do. We do have a responsibility to try to make these people better when they leave jail. But at the same time, we have a responsibility as a Commonwealth that we don't always fulfill this responsibility to uphold discipline while these people are incarcerated. And maybe not necessarily the drug and alcohol treatment program that you're speaking of, and some of the other programs that we have. There are worthy treatment programs, but I think we need to take a look at every treatment program and see and identify programs that are not working, and we either got to revamp them or we got to get rid of them, because it's a waste of time and it's a waste of money.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I look forward it's our job on this side of the table to look at the funding, and sometimes I don't think we're creative enough to get where funding doesn't always have to come from the taxpayer. So I look forward to working with you on that. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Using some of the opioid money is a fantastic idea.
Representative Watrow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just got to get it on record. I think it's unfortunate we're even having this conversation today. We should be talking about how we could better provide the safety of correctional officers. Spending 2 hours up on that hill today and watching the ratio is insane. But I just wanted to put that on record. That's a conversation we should be having. Unfortunately, underneath the Wolf administration, there was this mass exit of prisoners. And the question I have, I'm sure those prisoners are on state parole out in the community. Does anybody on this panel know, do we have any MIA absconders that are on state parole?
I wish I could give you a very accurate number. We have thousands of absconders across Pennsylvania. And if, like we just talked about bed capacity, if we brought all those absconders back, I think our jails would be at 100% across the board, 100% capacity. The problem is, I don't even know that we're looking for these people anymore. And I'm going to take a stab, and I hope I'm not wrong, but we're somewhere in the neighborhood of 7,000 to 10,000 absconders across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
So, Mr. President, you're saying that and I'm sure they will be caught at some point because we have the best law enforcement in the country right here in Pennsylvania. And when they are caught, we're not even going to have the beds to put them back in prison because that is a violation of parole. Is that correct?
That's correct. They should be coming back to prison.
The second thing, I guess, is more a statement. And I just looked really quick here on the mission statement from the boot camp. Being a combat veteran myself, when I heard boot camp, it just resonated. 6 things automatically came to my head was sense of accomplishment, increased discipline, valuable skills, physical and mental resilience, teamwork, which is super important, and leadership skills. How many boot camps are here in the Commonwealth?
I believe 1.
Right here? Wow. Just for those 6 reasons, I believe this must stay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Langeholk.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. This will be kind of directed towards Ms. Liptak, Commander Blake. It's maybe by way more of a comment, but feel free to weigh in after this. And just to kind of draw attention to this, to the policy committee's attention as we progress forward. And that's something that has been brought up ad nauseum since this potential closure was announced, is that the boot camp needs a reboot, in my opinion. That it has not grown with the times of STTP, and we understand the unintended consequences of what you had indicated the JRA 2 did. That legislation, while it was intended to help more that are dealing with substance abuse programs, it kind of left boot camp behind, and there's not that incentive. And we've heard the testimony. I've been to, when I was at the boot camp hearing from the corrections officers saying that people are actually enlisting into the boot camp only to switch over to STTP because they're given preference if they're in that facility. So, I mean, that's one thing that we need to address. But also, I'm glad that you brought up the age requirements. I think that if it's even, I would go as far as, extending that. If you are, duly qualified or able to do that, you should take advantage of it. Because I think we've gotten so far afield of what, and not just in corrections, but as a country at whole. I mean, how many people here on this panel in their districts go to an employers and say, we can't find employers anymore. We can't find employees. Nobody wants to work. We can't find people to do the hard work. This program is hard. Boot camp is hard. There's no doubt about that. But there's no carrot to that. And I think the legislation that I've actually proposed in the Senate to address that, which we're working on, would decrease that tail. I would go as far as if you come out of the boot camp, you should be rewarded for that. And if you're clean for 3 years misdemeanor, maybe we expunge your record. 5 years felony, I would go as well. I mean, I'm a former prosecutor, so I'm not, exactly willing to give a lot on this, but I recognize the efficiency with the people that are coming out of that boot camp, and that should be recognized for that. And just one other caveat to that, the SDTP, you indicated, they're not allowed to be employed when they're in the therapeutic community. Very dangerous. You know the old saying, what idle hands are. And these therapeutic communities are not necessarily in this area. Some are in Pittsburgh or in inner city. So you're putting someone out, telling them they cannot work. How are you setting them up for success? Versus you put somebody in the boot camp, they're coming out with a GED or with vocational certificates. It's proven. That's a stat that the DOC is not hidden behind, that what they're producing. So look forward to rebooting the boot camp. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to join my colleagues here in the House. Thank you for the opportunity. But just by way of what's coming here and how I think that we can really use this as a wake-up call to change that. I think get more people into the boot camp, and then eventually, in the long run, you're going to save a lot more money, and you're going to be producing individuals that are ready to work and that can help the crisis that we have now in Pennsylvania. If you want to weigh in, please, but thank you.
Well, I agree with you saying about getting them to work, and prior to me retiring, I agree with you making sure they work, and that really bothered me, that people wasn't allowed to work and when they was in a therapeutic community. Also, what really bothered me, which I found out after I retired, myself and a couple other colleagues up in the boot camp program, because boot camp always always had to be our own savior of the program. We had always had to do that, and I came up with an idea along with some colleagues, and I actually went to Clearfield Votech I found out that truck driving was a felon-friendly, job, was felon-friendly. And prior to me leaving there, they had everything set up. They was going to get the trucks. They kept telling me that the trucks are coming. And then I found out later on they moved to another facility. And for me, I feel that something was already went through in the cards before, because they sent it to another institution, which that was the idea that Quahana came up with. And that really hurt me. It bothered me to the gill. And so we've always tried to control our own destiny. You can't put a square peg in a round hole. You can't put a square peg in a round hole. And I know that they feel that basically they can just put it in another facility. You can't put a square peg in a round hole and get the same results, because you have to. It's the culture. It's the culture up there of the people, and the people do a fantastic job. And I'm not just saying that because I'm retired. I still talk to a lot of these people. I run into them, some of them at church. It just bothers me, and that's why I'm here today. So, thanks.
If I may just elaborate a little bit on what Commander Blake said when he says about you can't put that square peg in a round hole. You can't find treatment as it relates to alcohol abuse, drug abuse, and just criminal mindset and thinking anywhere like you can Quahana. You cannot sit out in the middle of a grass yard and watch this wildlife go by you and be just mentally sound and mentally fit and get the type of treatment you need without the distraction of what is happening in these larger institutions. As much as they are saying and touting the boot camp can be put anywhere, I challenge you to find me a place that is more recovery friendly than Carthage, Pennsylvania. Thank you.
Representative Kephart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And, to show how cross county lines this goes, I would mention that 4 of the 5 at this panel live in my district. So that's how, we're in Center County. We reviewed Rockview today. The local president lives in Clearfield County. This is how it impacts people. In Clinton, there was a guy today, the major, he was with us. He was from Clinton County. So it really does just affect more than just here. But I have 2 questions, one for Mr. Eckenrode and one for Mr. Clark. And by the way, Fraser is correct. Mr. Blake's correct. I asked him last week to join us, and I managed to track him down. So he was not. I appreciate him doing so. So, Mr. Eckenrode, you said that you mentioned this some, but whenever we were over there today, and I asked some of the I think it was the one major I asked, and he was sort of saying about what you said. Over 2,000 inmates at Rockview. What do you think is going to happen whenever you start moving some of them guys around? I mean, we weren't allowed, or was highly pushed away from going in the RHU today, the restricted housing unit, because it's, those guys are in there a little bit, violent individuals, I guess. What's going to happen when you start moving them guys around? Do you think that's going to be good for correction officers at other locations?
Are you speaking specifically to the RHU inmates?
Well, I mean, in general. I mean, Rockview has some of the, some interesting folks in there. Murderers, rapists, burglars, you name it. They're in there.
I know that's not the only jail you've been in, and I know that there's interesting folks all across all of our jails. But I kind of touched on increasing the individual populations at these jails, but what people overlook and don't understand if you don't work in these facilities is every jail is like its own city. It's either behind a fence or a wall. And we are going to introduce a new criminal element, unfortunately, into all these facilities. There's corners out on the street that are owned by criminals. In our jails, there's corners of our yards. There's housing units that are owned by criminal individuals that still do criminal type activity behind our fences and our walls. And what's going to happen is we're going to create a power struggle because we're going to introduce new criminals into a new city. And I've seen it happen before. I was part of a closure in 2013, and we moved a bunch of inmates across the Commonwealth when we closed Crescent and Greensburg. And there's going to be turf wars, for lack of a better term. I don't know how else to put it, but we're going to have turf wars inside of our jails.
Yeah, and that's what was really laid to me on the ground inside the prison today, is they said, you know, there's gangs in here and stuff, and when they start mixing with the other ones, it's not going to be good. And that's going to put at harm our constituents, your members, in harm's way, be behind bars, which is already a dangerous job. I remember the first time I ever met you, I've shared this with you before, I remember vividly, he said, you know, how do you feel? And I said, well, if your mission is safety of your officers, I think we're going to get along well. So I want to forward along here, though, to Mr. Clark. You know, everybody, they keep saying, the administration keeps saying, well, no one's going to lose their job, no one's going to lose their job. You know, they're just going to be shifted around or whatever. So it's 67 miles from the facility. So from Rockview, where you work, would include Muncie, down around, you know, Williamsport way. You live in my district in Clearfield County.
Yes, sir.
How far is it to Muncie? I called it a term I'm not going to share here today on the camera, but you know, play games if you guys, because you know, 67 miles. Now, luckily, you've been there for a while, so you probably have some seniority. But some of our other members that live in Phillipsburg, Shawville, Clearfield, that work at Rockview, if they had to go to Muncie, wouldn't that be an inconvenience?
Yes, sir. It'd be probably 110, 120 miles one way to work.
Yeah, so two hours to work probably. Yeah, I just want it on the record that, you know, if they say, oh, well, we gave you a job here in Muncie and you live in Clearfield, it's not really convenient. And, you know, that's a good way to push you to the side and force retirement on you or moving out of the profession. So I just want that on the record that it's not 67 miles from your house, 67 miles from the facility. And some of these guys, like Mr. Clark here, travel about an hour already. So anyhow, thank you for your service as well.
Thank you, sir.
Chairman Benninghoff.
Good job, Dallas. You set me right up for that one. Now, thank you all to the panelists. I actually have a question, but I want to make a statement in addition to what Dallas said. Keep in mind, traditional employment for a lot of people, shifts are 7 to 3, 3 to 11, 11 to 7. Yours are not. I think yours are 10 to 2 and whatever. The thing I want people to realize is you have young employees whose spouse also works. I'd like to think you make enough money, only one of you do, but the reality is, in today's world, it takes both people working. Some of you, I suspect, probably have spouses who are trying to hope you get home in time so that you can take care of children and they can leave, whether it's an overnight shift or 3 to 11 shift. So the impact is not just for that one employee, but to try to manage the family life and the home life. And maybe people say, well, that's not the government's business. We don't want intrusion on there, but it is a reality for those families, and I think we need to keep that in mind. To Fraser and to Lisa, I know it's not easy to be talking about the establishment where you work, and Stephen as well. You take some risk doing that, and we've had others we wanted to testify, but they were fearful in doing that, which is a sad statement in itself. The question I have is actually, any one of you or John wants to answer this, but John, you had mentioned the Suboxone treatment program. Sometimes I think our citizenry thinks because the bad guy gets picked up and put in jail, our streets are safer. But the crime doesn't stop. Crime also happens internally. So I guess the question is, you made a comment about the Suboxone issue, and I'm curious, just for our listeners who may not be here, if you could expand on that, one of you, and address it as whether they also have present or past addictions that we're addressing. Again, I think people think, boom, they're going to jail, they're going to be clean now. I don't think that's the case.
No, it's unfortunate, but we do have a drug trade inside every facility in Pennsylvania, and I'm sure that's nationwide. I can't tell you. I can tell you every facility across this country has some sort of a drug trade in it. I've talked to inmates. Like I said, I've been doing this for 26 years. I still know thousands of inmates across the Commonwealth. I tour jails all the time, and when I go into jail, some of these people recognize me. And I'll tell you a real quick story, if I may. I ran into an individual that I've known for over 20 years, an inmate, and I asked him how it was going. You know, we had a little chit-chat, small talk, and he said, man, they got me on this Suboxone stuff. And I said, I didn't know you were a user. And he said, I used 12 years ago. He said, I haven't used an illicit drug in 12 years. And I said, well, why are you on Suboxone? And he said, because they told me if I don't take the Suboxone, I can't get paroled. So there we have a clean individual, 12 years clean. And we make them take Suboxone to be eligible to go out on parole. Number one. Number two, I've been told that it's free. Like basically, if you want to sign up and be on the Suboxone program, even though you've been incarcerated for a decade, and you haven't been out on the street using drugs, all you got to do is sign up, and you get to be part of that program.
Want to elaborate on that? Again, I want for people who aren't totally knowledgeable about the whole drug world and the treatments using Suboxone, which is something we do on the outside of jails, but average person doesn't realize that it's also something can be utilized to treat people internally, whether they're a current addict or apparently past addicts.
I mean, reiterating what John says, when we get initials in, I do transports a lot for the DOC, and when we get initials in, we get a lot of them that come in that, it's their first time back or whatever, and they're automatically just put on the Suboxone line because they had a drug charge at one point in time in their life, so they put them on it.
But they're not drug tested to see if they're hot then?
No, I mean, whenever they come into the jail, they're not, no.
Okay.
Parole violators are, but not initial inmates.
All right, thank you. Anyone else?
I just have very little to add to that. I will say when we arrive individuals to Quahana, they are initially, upon reception, urine tested, each and every one. What they do with that after that, I am not privy to. I will also say that we do offer also a Suboxone sort of medical assisted treatment line. I don't know what the parameters to get onto that are. I can very clearly and factually communicate that our amount of inmates receiving that treatment within the past 30 days has more than doubled. I couldn't tell you why or what the changes in the parameters for it were.
And if I may, I had a meeting recently being 6 or 8 months ago with the Department of Corrections, and they informed me that they do plan on expanding the Suboxone program.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the testifiers.
Representative Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate everyone's testimony today. I wanted to dig a little bit deeper, both first in the area of violence and percentages in inmates. We were having a side conversation that during the tour today it was discussed about if you have certain individuals in areas or mental health individuals, there may be additional beds that aren't utilized because there is a person, that maybe needs to be in an area by themselves. During appropriations hearings, it said, hey, this prison and a lot of prisons are 90% or below, and so we have plenty of room to spread these people around. Can you, and Ms. Liptek, I see you're smiling, can you talk, because we hear a lot about the struggles that corrections officers, individuals with mental health, the backlog on assessments, how does that impact the actual capacity versus stated capacity that was, shared with us during appropriations?
I only have one quick statement, and then I'll give that to John. There is a difference in the correctional system between an available bed and a vacant bed. So those two things need to be kind of separated, and I'll let Mr. Eckenrode kind of elaborate on that.
I'm going to start off with custody level. Custody level is determined by a group of people that, they say you're either a level 2, level 3, level 4. Anybody that is put in restrictive housing is considered a level 5. That's the worst of the worst. Our facilities also have custody levels. Chester, for instance, is a custody level 2 facility. SCI Fayette is a custody level 4 facility. Now, here's the problem that we run into. There's nobody in the Department of Corrections in leadership that can tell you how these custody levels for jails are determined. When you ask them what's the criteria, tell me exactly why this is a level 4 and this is a level 2, they can't tell you. They'll tell you about physical layout. They'll talk about the fencing system. Benner Township's right beside Rockview. Rockview is a level 3 facility. But when you add up the total number of individual inmates, and I can speak for Benner, I can't speak for Rockview. At one point in time, we're considered a level 3 facility at Benner, but we had more level 4 inmates than SCI Fayette had in 2015 or whatever year it was. But we were still considered a level 3. So, how they come up with these numbers on custody level and what determines where inmates get moved, I wish I had an answer for you. And the problem is, I don't have the answer, but guess what? I don't think they have the answer either.
So when we hear 90% capacity, is the definition of capacity available beds or vacant beds?
Well, unfortunately, I don't know.
Because that's a pretty significant, particularly, it almost sounds like, there are these different circles because you could have a level 2, 3, 4. And those, we asked about the alternative of maybe closing wards or wings so that you would still have the facility, but if numbers are down, then you could keep your percentages up. Could there be other ways, if in the eyes of the prison administration, hey, we have underutilized buildings, is the utilization in dispute, or is the application of how those prisoners are spread out through the facility? Like, is there an alternate way that we'd be able to bridge this gap?
Well, I know at one point in time, recently, because of the amount of overtime that our members were working, they did close some housing units down. I can't say that it was for sure that it was in each facility, but a number of housing units were closed down. And I think that we still have the ability to close more if we wanted to. And, strategically place inmates where we could cut costs by, if we don't have to man a housing unit, those individuals can be redeployed somewhere else, and then we don't have to hire overtime to make sure that we have appropriate staff to carry out the plan of the day.
My last
I hope that answers your question.
Yes. Yeah, my last question, Mr. Chair, if I could slide it in for Mr. Blake. I was struck. I'm a big believer in work, and, really this recidivism is a number so high that everyone wrestles with. In your testimony, you had mentioned that aside from the boot camp program, the other program does not really instill like work skills, work ethic, because the confidence that comes from an individual learning how to do work. Can you expand on that a little bit more?
Well, the thing is, like, what it is like these guys in the therapeutic community. Oh gosh, these guys in the therapeutic community. The problem is that I've noticed over the years that I was there is we wasn't per central office, we wasn't allowed to let them work, and the boot camp inmates themselves, they had to work, and SDTP, they can just pretty much do the program, go to the center and be done, and don't have no skills. And you see that in a lot of them, because they knew they was going to have that flat 2-year sentence. They knew that. They knew they was going to be leaving, and it's flat 2-year sentence. And it wasn't. And the thing is, like what I said is, they need some type of structure. They need some type of vocational program. We've tried, and I know we did get them, some of them, GEDs, because we have the highest GED rate in the state. For a small facility, I always tell them we carry a big punch. But we had the biggest GED rate of all the facilities. The thing is like you got to get these guys and gals some type of structure and some type of that they can go out and be more productive and not just go out and start selling drugs or start robbing somebody. And that was the thing that really bothered me about with the SDTP guys and girls and stuff. So that's what I had.
Thank you, Commander. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Marcel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you so much to the panelists for spending so much time answering questions and trying to help us to better understand. I have a question, Ms. Liptek. I was reading your testimony, and I noticed that you went on to explain about at an arbitration hearing that there was a department official who testified at the hearing on behalf of the Commonwealth against female correction officers being paid double time when mandated out of turn, even though male corrections officers were afforded that rate in the same circumstance. Can you elaborate on, so this was a department official that stated this?
The female, let's rewind a little bit. Quehanna Boot Camp is a facility that houses both male and female inmates. As such, it is required by the department, and I believe federally also, that there be a female officer available to every female inmate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. As you can imagine, in corrections, female to male ratio of correctional officers is very odd, and sometimes there wouldn't be a female available, and one would have to be mandated to cover the institution in that way. When mandated in that situation, the ladies were being paid the 1.5 times their salary for that overtime. However, if they were not, in turn, the next to be mandated as dictated by the PSCOA contract, they would not receive the double time pay that a male counterpart would receive if he had been mandated out of turn. Does that clarify that kind of the situation a little bit?
It does. I'm just deeply disturbed.
Yes, ma'am.
That we would treat.
It is 2025, ma'am.
Senator Dush.
So,
oh, I'm sorry, Representative Marcel.
I was
I'm
just
sorry,
pausing.
go on.
Sorry.
No, please do.
So my question is, did that individual who stated that ever provide justification for the statement, or is there anything that is formal, like that states this somewhere? If I was trying to follow up to get more information about this,
It was an official
is
arbitration.
this a Shapiro administration decision, or is this something that's been happening?
I don't have the dates for you. That being said, it was an official arbitration that went through the PSCOA and the Commonwealth and would be on file with each of those entities, and also was dictated during the hearing.
We would have record of that, number one. Number two, anytime we do an arbitration, we utilize like a sergeant's agency to come in and take minutes. So we would have minutes of that arbitration.
I definitely would be interested in seeing those minutes and following up on this. And I just wanted to apologize to you that you felt that way as a woman in serving, and we don't have as many as the males, which doesn't matter. But I think that for you to feel that way and for someone from the administration to be a part of that is disturbing. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you very much, and I will relay that to my counterparts as well.
Senator Dush.
Thank you, Chairman. And I have a few questions. First of all, John, I want to come back to you on the Suboxone thing. That gentleman that you talked about, however many years he was drug-free, inmates still have to go through random drug tests, correct?
I'm sorry, I missed the question.
The inmates still have to go through random drug testing, don't they?
Inmates are tested randomly, periodically, yes.
So he's been cleared for years, and now they're forcing him to go on to Suboxone.
That was his, that's what he informed me, yes.
That's nuts. That just plain nuts. Fraser, you and I worked together over at Houtsdale when it opened, and as you indicated, you'd come from Waymart was the first, or yeah, Waymart, then the boot camp, then you came over to us, and you've had experience as a corrections officer. You were a maintenance guy. You administration. So soup to nuts, you know what goes on within the Department of Corrections, and the difference between trying to have a boot camp at where it is now. If they were to try to do that down at SCI Houtsdale, which would be the closest facility to where it is now, is there any way that the inmates could be could experience what Alyssa was talking about, the therapeutic nature of the location? Because there's not I'll tell you right now, there's not a prosecutor, there's not a judge, there's not a parole officer in the Commonwealth that doesn't understand, that's been in for any length of time, that doesn't understand what happens with their people that they send upstate that end up going through that boot camp program. Do you see any way that can be done effectively in an institutional setting?
I really don't for the simple reason. I really don't for the simple reason.
It's not on. I don't think it's on. Oh, it's on? Okay.
I really don't for the simple reason. You got it. The officers that at the Quahana boot camp, they do the physical training and everything. They do that. They don't get paid no more money for doing that.
No.
And you got to have that buy-in. Shipping these officers all over the state, and then you put a boot camp program in SEI Housedale, you might well not even have a boot camp program because you're not going to have that buy-in. I mean, you're going to have an officer that basically he's going to say, no, I ain't going to do it. I'm not doing this, and it's it can't be done, you know. And you talking about I myself, when I was a major, I actually went to one of the judges' conference, and myself and the program manager and actually the captain at the time, and we was at the judge conference, and I didn't really realize judges, you know, we was able to give them a presentation.
Yes.
I had one judge actually said that boot camp program don't work. I sat down. He sat down with him at the bar right there. I sat down with him, and I talked to him about that program. He started calling me and telling me I'm sending this guy up to the boot camp program because I think he needs that. I'm gonna be honest with you. That opened up the gate for more folks. But then I was told later on I can't advocate for inmates. I was told that. I was told that I can't advocate, and I was trying my best to get more people up there. You know, it bothered me, you know, but the powers that be above me, I had to do what they tell me because, you know, otherwise, you know, I would have to go.
Frazier, 16 years in the Department of Corrections. I went the opposite direction. First 8 years was administration. Most of the gray hair I've got came from that first 8 years. Went into a uniform. It was easier working with inmates than it was with central office. You guys all understand that. I know that. Greg, I want to touch on something here that you touched on. The largest Grange Fair encampment east of the Mississippi, it's known nationwide, occurs just over the ridge here. And Grange Week, you can't hardly get through Center Hall because of all the traffic. That is a huge economic benefit to the community. What the department, what the prisoners do, our inmates do. Do you see any way that that fair survives without the inmates doing the setup necessary in the weeks leading up to it at the level that it is now, or do you see it being severely diminished?
I don't know if I can answer that, Senator, directly. I think the impact is going to be tremendous. I mean, if you've been there and you've seen the encampment that's set up,
yes,
that's what they're using inmate labor for, is to set up those tents, and it takes 7 to 8 weeks. If you can imagine setting up all those tents, now needing to replace that with either volunteers or paid individuals to come and set that up, it has to be a tremendous impact. Whether it has an overall impact on whether the fair can survive or not, I can't answer that question.
I don't think the fair will ever not survive, but what I do see is a huge diminishing of the sheer numbers and the ability to afford it. So John, well, anybody here on the team, we saw over Rockview today both the lumber facility, which, by the way, I was encouraged when the staff were talking about, one of their inmates came back and actually made a presentation to everybody in that lumber or the timber guys, all the other inmates, about how employable they are whenever they come out. There are a number of other opportunities there with the woodworking, the machine shops and stuff like that. Setting those up in different locations, that's going to take a capital cost because our DCNR local communities that want signs that are out there saying what township, what city they are, they're relying on that inmate labor to produce something that's some beautiful graphic artwork and stuff. Can you address, do you see has the department said anything to you guys about how they would go about or where they would transfer those facilities? If they would?
No one has really covered any of that with any of us. It's, you know, they talked about leaving it there for a time being for the CI shop, but no one is nothing substantial.
Now, we haven't received anything yet, and because for time, I would just want to touch on something that Stephen and John touched on before. I was there around with the closure SCI Pittsburgh, Crescent, and when I remember at Houtsdale, Fraser, you remember we put in the day rooms, we ended up putting up cages and creating dorm rooms out of those. Same thing, similar stuff happened up at Forest. And they turned around and had to reopen Pittsburgh because they underestimated that fluctuation. You said about 7,000 inmates. Those definitely impact officer safety because you may be adding 40 or so inmates to a cell block when the officer's already outnumbered to 250 to 1. So, and those inmates know how to take advantage of keeping the officers occupied, their criminal activities, that sort of thing. I don't see, even as poorly planned as it was closing Pittsburgh the way they did it, I don't see this being even close to being as well planned as that. Thank you.
I want to thank all of you very much. I think you have given us far more in the last hour than the administration has given us in the way of answers over the last couple of months. So thank you very much for your willingness to be here and your transparency. We have got one final panel that will be very brief. We're going to bring up Mr. Josh Paul, who is the Legislative Director to Senator Dave Argall, who is the Chairman of the Senate Policy Committee. Mr. Paul, good afternoon. Thank you very much for being with us. You have the floor.
Absolutely. Chairman Rowe, representatives of this House Republican Policy Committee, Senator Langerholt, Senator Dush, thank you for allowing me to speak before you on behalf of Senator Argall, the chair of the Senate Majority Policy Committee, who is unable to join you today. He is, however, looking forward to the joint Senate and House Policy Committee hearing taking place this Wednesday in Pittsburgh, and for future meetings with you, Mr. Chairman, and these two policy committees. I've worked for Senator Argall for 7 years. Currently, I work as his legislative director and executive director of the Senate Majority Policy Committee. The purpose for my appearance today is to talk about the first hearing that the Senate Majority Policy Committee held this session, which took place on January 9th of this year in Hamburg, Berks County. Now, this hearing was held at the request of Senator Chris Gebhard and Senator Scott Hutchinson in order to review the significant statewide problem of vacant, unused state properties and how they affect the communities that host them. As members of this committee can recall, the Wolf administration shut down the Hamburg Center in 2018 and the Whitehaven and Polk Centers in 2023. These centers were closed without legislative input from either the legislature or the general public. Since their closings, the state has not provided a concrete plan on the proper reuse or sale of these properties, and so now the taxpayers are forced to subsidize empty buildings. Since their closings, these 3 state centers alone are now estimated to cost over $28 million a year to maintain. Getting answers from the administration has been difficult to say the least. Because of regulations, the process has been unnecessarily long and shrouded in less than transparent means. Before the administration works with the legislature to get these properties up for sale, the administration must perform environmental surveys, an appraisal, and boundary surveys. Now, while it's understood that these things may take some time, Senator Argall frequently notes that the Hamburg Center has been closed for 7 years, and only now has legislation been able to be introduced. This administration has not given concrete updates on the Polk or the Whitehaven centers. In response to inaction by the past and current administrations, Senator Argall, Senator Gebhard, and Senator Hutchinson introduced legislation to demand a detailed plan from the Department of General Services on how these properties will be sold and put to better use. This legislation was initially introduced last session and was approved by the Senate with an overwhelming bipartisan vote of 47-3. The bill was referred to the House State Government Committee after passing the Senate, but did not receive a vote. As Senator Argel says, this legislation is simple, but necessary to the ongoing waste. Senate Bill 408 requires the Department of General Services to create a detailed plan for divesting the 3 state centers and requires the plan to include a 3-year timeline for transferring these properties from the state to buyers and to detail any ongoing discussion with potential buyers. For concrete estimates, the legislation would also require an evaluation of costs for demolishing or refurbishing the buildings on these properties, especially those that are determined to be structurally unsound. More than anything, Senator Argel does not want to see a repeat of what happened to the Allentown State Hospital, knowing this as the worst-case scenario if action is not taken. In 2010, the state spent approximately $2.2 million each year for 10 years for upkeep and security until ultimately raising it in 2020 for an additional $12.7 million, a total of about $34.7 million. Through inaction, the state nearly tripled the amount of taxpayer dollars wasted, and similar situations are also to be seen at SCI Pittsburgh and the Harrisburg State Hospital. Statistics that were presented to the Senate Majority Policy Committee detailed that from 2017, the year the SCI Pittsburgh was closed by the Wolf administration, millions of dollars have been spent in order to maintain the property. Now, while there are ongoing debates and discussions about the future of the former prison, it has been reported that estimates for demolition will cost anywhere from $40 million to $50 million. This according to a report from a story last month in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. From 2006 to 2024, an estimated $90 million had been spent on the former Harrisburg State Hospital, an annual cost of $5 million. According to the Pennsylvania Department of General Services, most of the buildings on the property are set to be demolished to make way for a new $450 million joint laboratory complex. Senator Argel has frequently said in his conversations with the administration and the public that in a time where the Commonwealth is facing a significant structural deficit, the ongoing waste of these empty buildings, which cost millions of dollars every year, is inexcusable. During the policy hearing, Senator Argel noted that the last 2 administrations should be embarrassed by this continuing bureaucratic nightmare. In testimony presented before the House and Senate State Government Committee on September 10, 2019, former Secretary of General Services Kurt Topper spoke about reselling state properties and stated simply and plainly that time is money. Secretary Topper said that exactly 2,043 days ago, and to quote Senator Argel, this governor claims that his administration wants to move at the speed of business. However, no private employer would willingly flush millions down the drain to maintain empty properties year after year. There needs to be a concrete plan to get these properties off the tax rolls and back into productive use, and to ensure that we break the cycle of bureaucratic red tape.
Thank you very much, Mr. Paul. I was just looking over the co-sponsorship memo, and I realize that you're just here on behalf of Senator Argel, so I don't want to ask you to say anything. But looking at this co-sponsor memo, referencing the DGS give the legislature estimates for the yearly costs of each property since the institution were closed, in expected costs associated with each property if they are not sold, and costs related to demolition or refurbishment. And I think that middle one is very important because we talked today a lot about the economic impact locally, right? We're talking about thousands of jobs. We're talking about small businesses. We're talking about county fairs. We're talking about a community that will be significantly impacted if these facilities that we're discussing today were to close. But it's adding salt to the wound if those properties are not then used for something else. If you're shuttering a property, mothballing it, and it still continues, as we have referenced today, as you just referenced, it continues to still be a drain on taxpayer resources, and the private sector is not able to come in because of the impact, whether it's the regulatory standard, whether the state's just not getting rid of it, what have you. It's just pouring salt in the wound for these communities that have already been hurt when you make these massive changes to them. So is there any data that either would have been done maybe by regional chambers of commerce or NFIB or anything that somebody might have that we can look at what the cost to the community is? Is that something you could even quantify when you're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars in taxpayers' money being spent to maintain vacant facilities, adding to the amount of lost economic activity for the regions? Is that even possible to quantify?
Based on the testimony that was received at the Senate Majority Policy Committee's hearing, of course, Senator Argel, Senator Gebhardt, and Senator Hutchinson wanted to invite those local groups, as you had mentioned, Mr. Chairman, and they basically stated that, you know, there is a willingness to do something with the properties because as of right now, they're not being put to productive use. So anything that they can do in working with the Department of General Services in order to get them off the tax rolls back into productive use, they prefer to do that sooner rather than later. There have been some efforts in the past, I can say, with the Hamburg Center and the local redevelopment authority down there, but if those efforts fell through once the Department of General Services was requesting too much money for that transfer.
Yes, absolutely. Chairman Benninghoff.
First of all, thank you for taking time to come here. For those people who don't think the two chambers can get along, we can get along, but I think you folks have done some good work, and I appreciate you taking my invitation and come here. I want the listeners to think about some of the numbers you threw out there. You said Allen State Hospital, Allentown, $22 million was spent to make it a vacant lot. Pittsburgh, SEI, $4.2 million. Harrisburg State Hospital, that one was just an atrocity. $90 million and sat there empty for all these years. And we're looking at about $116 million. And yet the local regional representatives here and the public and the employees are all sitting worried about they're losing their jobs for $10 million a year. For maintenance, I think from what we saw today, 50% of which is done. To me, this is double debt. You have properties that are not earning tax dollars because they're tax exempt. So for years and years and years and years, people that live in those communities, the taxpayers, are paying more in property taxes because you have hundreds of acres that could be utilized for something better or productive that could be paying taxes if you had them on the public rolls. Most people don't realize that. In Benner Township, where our two prisons sit, state prisons, both Benner and Rockview, is severely handicapped because the majority of their land is untaxed because they're off the tax rolls, either for the prison owning thousands of acres, a little bit for the game commission and our university and airport. It has very little taxable dollars, but yet the community sees their taxes going up. So again, I think there's a need to be a concerted effort as we get in this budget cycle. These timelines need to be shortened. This should not take years and years and years and years to go through these ridiculous processes to liquidate these properties. So any information you can share with State Government Committee in the House, I know our chairman would be most interested, and I know our policy chairman here has obviously had his ears perked up here thinking about what more we can do, and I appreciate you being here for our hearing and sharing these graphs with us.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Paul. I want to close by thanking all of the members sincerely for making the trip here. I know it was quite a bit of a haul. I want to thank all of our attendees for coming as well. I think that the governor's decisions has left a lot of questions unanswered, questions that we learned a lot about just today when we took our own tour of Rockview. I'm sure there will be questions that we will have tomorrow when we visit Kehanna. Questions like the thriving programs at Rockview, whether it's the forestry program, whether it's the upholstery program, whether it's the wood shop program. And I specifically asked one of the folks working there today, what happens to these programs if Rockview shuts down? And they said they have no idea. They don't know what that means. So these inmates who have a path to returning to society, we all know somebody who might be a good person but made a bad decision. And entities like Rockview that have stellar, I think the second lowest recidivism rate of any male incarceration facility in the state, have stellar records like Rockview, or have incredible track records like Kehanna does of returning people to society. Those are the types of facilities we should be celebrating and emulating, not mothballing. So I want to thank you all very much for your time, for coming here today. I want to... Oh, yes, thank you very much. Yep. All right. I want to thank, obviously, our hosting members here, Representative Kephart, Chairman Benninghoff, our Senators Langeholk and Dush for joining us today. I do want to give a reminder that the Department of Corrections is holding a public hearing tomorrow on the proposed SCI Rockview closure, April 15th from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. at the Bald Eagle Area High School and Middle School building. Our next stop, however, is the Policy Committee. Will be in Pittsburgh for a joint hearing with our senators once again in the Senate Majority Policy Committee on the future of AI, 9 a.m. Wednesday morning on April 16th at Astrobiotic Technology. Until then, this meeting is adjourned.